This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. The Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard. And you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give
up. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Vicky from the Agonist, whose latest EP, Days Before the World Wept, is out now via Napalm Records. This was a really fun chat, and I first and foremost want to give a huge shout out to Napalm Records. Consistently, whenever I have someone that is on their roster of bands, I love the fact that they are able to get me something, especially when talking to a vocalist, that makes it so much easier to have the conversation with them, and that is providing the lyrics. That is something that when I talk to vocalists, before an album comes out, that it's sort of a struggle because I don't always get those things. And it's not, saying that any other label is bad or worse because of that. It's just something I've noticed that in my times of dealing with Napalm, they're always on top of everything because they have everything that I could want. They have all the promo photos that are going to be in there. They have the lyrics. They have, the little interviews with everyone in the EPKs and stuff like that. They are just, it's so great, and it makes this so much easier. And as a result, I feel like it was really something that helped me find something that I was trying to take away from when listening to the new EP was, one of the lyrics and the themes kind of presented in the new EP was talking about, time and our mortality and how, the shifting in perspectives as we get older in our own lives and taking ownership of our lives versus letting life just happen at us. And that's something that, having just had a birthday when I talked to Vicky, was so at the forefront of my mind that I couldn't not talk about it. And I think the thing that's interesting about it is, and something that she touches on in one of the other songs, and we touch on in the chat as well, is just this concept of, people seemingly kind of pissing away their time and not realizing how finite it is until basically your due date of something, the end of your life, or when you need to get something done, and then you're just rushing, and all you want at that point is all the time you fucked away. And to me, that's just so profound, and I feel like that's something that I think all of us struggle with. But the people who are, I feel like the happiest and most successful understand that time is one of the most valuable things you have, and it's very finite, and you need to kind of learn to live within the means of what you have and make the most of it. So that was a really great talking point to me, and something I found so interesting. And again, I don't know that I necessarily would have been able to kind of pick up on that so quickly had I not gotten the lyrics from Napalm and the lovely publicist. So all of that aside, let's get into my conversation with Vicky. This is a really great one, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So let's get into it, and I'll talk to you all on the other side of it.
Still morning for me.
Where are you? Because I know like some of your socials say like Chicago, Athens,
Yeah.
and somewhere else I'm blanking on off the top of my head.
Montreal, but
Montreal, that's it.
I'm in Chicago now.
So probably not much of a sports fan, but potentially are you at least following up with the White Sox right now, making a push against the Houston Astros? Nope, not at all.
No.
Fair enough. I just saw that the game was on when I was logging into stuff, and so it's kind of funny to having like when I went to the Kanye West Donda event in Chicago about 2 months ago at this point. It was just funny because it's like sport, like football wasn't going on. Sports really wasn't happening in Chicago, but it was just kind of interesting to think about. It's like, all right, like we here in the Midwest are kind of slowly kind of getting back to normal here in, post pandemic or still in the pandemic. But it was just kind of interesting to see Chicago downtown so alive with like the buzz of the Kanye West show and like all this kind of stuff and talking about it, just seeing like street performers out and vendors and just kind of the city being alive with like something to be excited about. And so it's kind of one of those, like, since I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so I'm not close to necessarily a big sports town or a big entertainment area. But just to kind of see Chicago get alive like that again kind of had me excited, where I'm like, man, it probably hasn't been like this in so long. So, it's funny to think about those that maybe aren't fans of music or aren't sports fans, like kind of having to get reacclimated to like, oh yeah, the fucking teams in the playoffs, or this is okay. Like, how do I have to change my life again now that I haven't had to deal with this for almost 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I follow some sports. Some I'm more interested in others. Baseball, just like, I don't know. Never was really into it. I like basketball, hockey, more so.
Hockey just started today. Actually, it starts today, doesn't it? Or was it yesterday?
I don't know. I usually get into it towards the end.
Okay, during the playoff runs.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, basketball's getting ready to start. This is like the prime time for me with sports because it's like basketball's getting ready to start. Baseball, well, at least my team's in the playoffs right now. So I still got a little bit of that. Hockey's getting ready to start, and football's in like kind of mid-swing. So it's like you got a little bit of everything, which when working at a bar like I do makes your nights go by a little bit faster instead of being like there's absolutely fucking nothing on, and watching people just get progressively more drunk is not fun either.
Yeah. I hear you.
So I don't really do like an interviewee kind of thing. It's more just kind of a natural conversation. But there is something about the new EP that I kind of wanted to talk about. And for those to do the plug, the new EP, Days Before the World Wept. There is a line in Immaculate Deception. And the line was, would you train an arm and a leg for the promise of time? And time is something that I get very weirdly fascinated by, especially as I get older. Like I just turned 37. So there's this thing where I feel like in light of us all kind of having a pause reset over the last year and a half, that I feel like that's a really interesting concept of, we seem to kind of piss away the time that we inherently have, but then when we don't have it, that's when we want it the most. Kind of talk to me a little bit about that line. And then how did it kind of come to you and maybe what it means to you?
Yeah. So the whole EP is based on the concept a little bit of time. And it starts with remnants in time, with a person literally like at the brink of death. And like you just said, like spot on, that's when it hits you that you want more time. You want to live a little bit longer. And that theme is recurring in the rest of the songs as well. So really, like, I feel like it's a little bit of an oxymoron, that line there. Would you trade an arm and a leg for the promise of time? Because I feel like people already go a little bit to extraordinary lengths to like look younger, or I wouldn't say feel younger, just look younger, like altering different surgeries and like, plastic surgery is like really, really popular nowadays. Like in some cases, you can't even tell that someone's done something. And it's just this like whole concept of like the elixir of youth and so on, which I always found, perhaps when I was younger, like you said, you don't really think about it too much because you're like, yeah, I'm young. And then after the age of 30, it starts like every year just keeps going and going and going and going, and you don't even realize it. but yet at the same time, I feel like I'm 33, by the way. I feel like I don't know. I feel like you should celebrate life no matter what age you are. Find like what is it in my 30s that's better than my 20s, and what is it in my 40s that's better than my 20s, and stick to that and live life to the fullest, because I don't think there's like one age gap or one age group that's like superior to all others. I think there's something positive to find in everything, and just like live life to your fullest. So a lot of times I write my lyrics in a way where it's like I'm kind of mocking it or I'm kind of frowning upon it. But it seems to be a hot topic. So I like mentioning it. I like talking about it.
Well, there's a couple of different talking points to that. And, one of them was actually brought up on a different chat I was doing. And I thought it was so profound, kind of just the simplicity of the statement, which was, and I wish I could remember who said it, but like sometimes you do a handful of these and you just forget, it all crams together. But, someone was saying like, when you're celebrating, your first birthday or whatever, that's a few months is only like a part of your one. But then like when you get to like 30, we'll say, and you're celebrating like 31, well, that's 1/30th of your life, basically. And so the fraction basically at that point is completely shifted into how you would look at time in that point. And it's one of those where something, and the kind of construct that I kind of took away from it was almost like, maybe instead of kind of looking at it like this is 1/30th of my life or 1/37th of my life, almost kind of apply the same prism of the like this is 1/12th of my year or whatever, where you kind of go, all right, I'm not going to stress about that because it's only like this little bit, but I'm actually going to be more in the moment and enjoy what I have. And as you were just kind of saying, having, and I'll pose this to you, I grew up always thinking when I turned 30, because it was such a landmark time that you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. You start thinking instead of in year, like you start thinking in 5 years, I want to do this. And then at 35, and then at 35 to 40. And you start looking at your life kind of in these half decades kind of.
Yeah.
Did that kind of happen to you, and kind of a shift sort of happen to you when you turn 30 versus even turning 25?
Yeah, I think when you turn 25, it's like usually like, at least in this day and age, or 5 years ago or 8 years ago for me, geez. I think it's still the same thing though. Like 25 is kind of like, it's your quarter life period where you're like, okay, I got to start being serious, no more partying, or, not every single weekend going out to drink and party and stuff like that. And like, start getting a little serious with your life. Whereas I feel like 30 is that milestone where people are like, okay, do I have savings? Am I living paycheck to paycheck? Do I have a job that I've been with, like a steady job that's paying? Do I have a significant other? Am I married? Am I on my way to kids? Like all these big questions start becoming even bigger. And that shift just happens from 25 to 30. Whereas I feel like from 30 to 35, it's not that big of a difference, because you're already in the big 30, right? For myself, I wouldn't say that I had all these questions that hit me at the age of 30. However, I did have the big one that hit me was regarding music. I felt like, am I doing what I want to be doing in music right now? And am I doing the most that I can possibly do? Because for me, doing music was always like, I want this to be a full-time thing. I don't want to become one of those people where I'm 40, 50, I have kids, and music is just this hobby that I do, when my day job permits it, and my personal life permits it. So I really wanted, like, I've been striving for this my entire life, to just like make music my full-time thing. And when I hit 30, that was the biggest like wake-up call that like, you know what? You should be doing more. You can be doing more, so you should be doing more.
Well, I think that kind of comes at 30 is like almost this past, or shucking, I should say, really shucking of blaming so many others or outside circumstances for the things that either you're not doing or have happened to you, versus then you looking inward and going, no, motherfucker. Like one of my favorite stories to tell is like, I had a friend I had many friends who would constantly blame like jobs not happening, relationships that failed. And it would be, well, they never going to find someone like me, or, if a failed relationship, and it's like, oh, that person's crazy. And one day I was just like, you ever notice you're the only constant in any of these things? Like, at some point you have to look inward and go, what the fuck am I doing wrong or not providing? And how do I fix it? Like, to just not take any ownership is bullshit. Like, there's no room to grow as a person at that point. So how do you just live your life not taking any ownership? And to me, like, that I think has been one of the biggest things getting older, is that I realize, like, there are extenuating circumstances of why things don't happen the way you want to, but then you have to look inward and figure out a way how to either take ownership of it and grow and move on. And I feel like as a musician, like definitely, I feel like that's got to be a thing for you, like, where it's almost, instead of, you could look down on and be like, well, I'm not doing the things I want to do, you can go, but look at all I have done, and maybe I now have opportunities to progress and do something else that I would like to do as well. Yeah. Is there a little bit of that kind of has happened?
For sure. Like, for me, there's two big things that I realized, maybe not exactly when I turned 30, but let's just say over the last few years, that the world doesn't owe you anything. And I think a lot of musicians that are very good at what they do and have worked very hard, so it's like combination of talent and hard work to become like really good at their instruments, they kind of get the sense that, like, you know what, I'm in the top 1% of the world. I'm better at guitar or at singing or whatever than most of these people out there. Therefore, I should be recognized. And it doesn't work that way, because first of all, not everyone is able to acknowledge and understand that you're in that 1%. You kind of have to force feed it to them. You kind of have to go out there and be like, you know what, I am really good at what I do, and I'm going to claim, my title or my spot or whatever, because it's not just about being good. Like, there's always going to be someone better than you. There's always going to be someone worse than you. It's really about what you're doing, what your output is. And are you connecting with people? Because fans not only want to, like, watch the musicians that they like before their music, they want to connect with the person as well. And in this day and age, like, social media is like super important for that. And for myself, I struggle with that a little bit, because, like, I always found social media a little bit like, oh man, I have to wake up and post again today. Like, oh, you got to post every day to keep the algorithm going, to pop up in people's searches so they can find you. And I'm like, can I just make music, like, and not have to deal with these things? But it's like, no, now you have to deal with these things, and you have to work 10 times harder, even when you are that good. So that was the one thing that, like, really hit me, that, like, you know what, Vicky, the world doesn't owe you anything. If you think that you're better than 99% of the other people out there doing this thing, you got to work even harder, not even less. So that was one. And I almost forgot what the second one was now, because I just went on a babbling over there. What were we saying? Realization, music.
Kind of looking inward and taking ownership of your own. Yeah.
Right. And that too, like there are circumstances that sometimes work against you, and obstacles. Like, how many of us just have these days where you wake up and everything is going wrong, and you just get bad news after bad news after bad news, but you gotta, like, not take that personally, because a lot of people, like, fall into that trap where they're like, oh, why is this happening to me? And it's like, it's happening to everyone, and it's not in your control. What is in your control is how you're going to deal with it. And the last few years, like, I've had, bad things thrown at me, like bad news from bandmates or whatever, that something happened. Like, oh, there's a problem with the music video, and, like, I'd find out, and, like, my bassist, Kels, that does the music, our music videos, he's like, expected you to be more pissed. And I'm like, oh, I'm very pissed. But if I start yelling, that doesn't solve the problem. I'm like, I went past that. Let's go into problem solving mode. Let's fix this and let's move on. So yes, those were my 2 points.
Well, it's funny you say that, because, like, it took me up until probably about 8 months ago going to therapy to have the tools to deal with that. Like, something that I was always bad with. And it's funny you said having things happen to you, because we are the star of our own movies. Everything happens at us, to us, whatever. And it wasn't until my therapist at the time was just like, well, did you ever think that, like, maybe these things aren't happening to you, but they're just happening around you, and you happen to, like, in the very specific situation, I was like, this thing happened, and I kept going, why me? Why am I always the one that this people come to with this, so on and so forth? And she was like, well, maybe you're not. Maybe you're one of many people that this person came to, or that these people come to for these situations. And I was like, oh. And then she was like, but it's in our nature to assume that we're the only one. And I was like, fuck, I'm really egotistical in that sense. And I guess we as people are. Yeah. But it was just so interesting to just kind of get that little piece of advice, or that little piece of just something, a different perspective on something, and just how it completely has changed my thought perspective. And even, you were saying, like, with the music video, something I had a problem with was doing a lot, like, cognitive therapy behavior, basically, where it's like, I would address problems that haven't even happened. And I would wallow in them. And then she'd be like, why do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know, because I want to be prepared. She goes, but like, you just came up with 8 different scenarios and 8 different problems and how to solve them, but only one of them is the actual thing you need to deal with. Yeah. And it was one of those, like, where I was like, huh. And now, like, I had a very stressful situation a couple of days ago. My car literally broke down in the middle of downtown on the busiest road we had. And instead of going, oh shit, what the fuck? Like, I just go, okay, what can I handle right now? Need to call a cop. It's literally across the street from me. Get someone behind me. Call a tow truck. Yeah. All right, then we do that. Then we just wait. Like, deal with what's in front of you and move forward. And by doing that, it's so funny how so much of the unnecessary stress just gets taken off of you. Yeah. So the fact that you are already there, I'm like, oh, you're 4 years ahead of where I was. So, like, isn't it so much better that you can at least go, I am pissed and I'm not stoked on this, but let's just focus on what we can do and move forward. And I feel like you could probably apply that to so many different things that you have going on in your life.
Yeah. So, like, number one, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, is that what goes on in your brain, or, like, what we call mental health or stress or all this, really does affect you physically. It affects your body. And if you're thinking, like you said, 8 different scenarios, what am I going to do, this and that, your brain is going into, like, it's overclocking basically, and your body starts shutting down and you feel exhausted every single day. And you're like, but why am I exhausted? I didn't really do anything. Well, you did. You were overworking your brain. And people don't realize that. And I have gone through periods of my life where I felt sick physically without being sick, just because of thinking of all these bad things that have happened or may happen, or, the what ifs and all that stuff. So that's something a lot of people don't realize, A. And B, again, why do I do this? I go off on one thing and I forget the second point I was going to make.
Happens all the time. It's the best part of a podcast, is there's not tentatively a time limit, so you can kind of circle back to things when you think of it.
I love podcasts for that reason, that you can just start babbling and it's like, wait, what was the question? But yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. And I've never had therapy myself. It's funny when I have vocal lessons, for example. Sometimes I talk to my students and they're like, oh, it's like I'm paying you for a vocal lesson and a therapy session. And oh, okay, I wasn't thinking of this, but this is an interesting thing that I came up with as well, that I realized that singing and vocals in general, performing, is like 90% mental. Like, if you're feeling like crap in your head and you think you suck and you're scared that you might fail and you're not going to do it, you're not going to sound good. Like, you can't go on stage and sound confident and nail and hit the notes and all this if you have all this self-doubt and all these issues in your head. Like, it's 90% mental, and you have to envision yourself doing it and being good for you to actually become good. And this is something I realized even longer ago, because I was always a shy, introverted person, and I always felt like I could do better and I could be better, and it was affecting my performance. And I think that's what it is that did it for me, that I had to that helped me overcome a lot of these mental issues, that it's this is an obstacle, and if you don't change the way you think or the way you deal with your thoughts, because you can't control your thoughts, but you can control how you react and how you act with them. You're not going to be a great vocalist. You're not going to be a great performer if you keep going down this path of like self-doubt and this and being shy and awkward and whatever. So it's like I'm still that person, but I just don't let my thoughts and my overthinking and all that like trip me moving forward.
It's kind of funny you say that. Something, and this is going to sort of sound cliche during probably part of the question because I'm literally working my way through it. But you kind of touched on something where, you know, talking about vocalizing and how a lot of, you know, being a front person of a band, it's sort of, it's, I don't want to call it performance art, but it sort of is. It's also, like you said, it's a mentality. You have to go in there going like, I'm going to fucking kill it. Like, because if you don't believe it and don't exude it, then people aren't going to be either. And they're going to tell, like, they can smell that a mile away. Yeah. And something, you know, interestingly enough, you know, Doc Coyle and I had kind of talked about this. We always get on the topic of social media typically. And just because it's an interesting talking point in the sense of we don't know what it's going to do to people. But what we can kind of talk about is sort of the case study of having to be on 24 hours. What do you present to everybody? And how do you live? Like, you know, some people are like, you never see anyone have a bad day. Like some people are just, that's how they curate their lives. Yeah. Some people are very honest about things. And I think it opens them to have more fans or more followers and so forth, because there's that genuineness of that experience of seeing someone else going through the same things you are. Now, adversely, we've kind of put that same prism onto, you know, the music industry, like, you know, talking about when Doc was coming up with God Forbid, the internet didn't really exist. So it was one thing to kind of come up and just make your band name known and make you known as a performer on the merits of just, are you a good musician? Can you play really good live? Do people like, yes. Now there's so many more facets. And we were kind of talking about it possibly being harder because now you have to like show up on Spotify playlists and do all this other stuff. Yeah. You know, I know you're not tremendously younger than either of us, but I feel like you potentially would have kind of gone through that a little bit differently than either of us. And we're men going through it where it's like sick riffs, cool tattoos, whatever the fuck. Like there's not even the expectation of like, well, you have to perform up to, and especially filling in as for a different vocalist, you have to hit these marks that people want. Like, did that cause some maybe questions about your own self-confidence of can you do it and to what ability, having to do like grow up in that kind of time frame of dealing with people, the vocal minority online?
I will say for me, it was never a question of my confidence. Like I said, I always knew I was good. My self-doubts go with like being a perfectionist. Like I know I can be better, but I never once thought that I wasn't good enough. Okay. Which is, I think, a blessing, because I think it's absolutely like crippling to be amazing at something and think that you're not, you know? So I don't have that disillusion. Like I always knew I was good. If anything, I felt that other people didn't know I was that good.
I'm not listening to you. I just came up with something and I want to make a note of it real quick before I forget. Ahead. So I'm not like completely.
No, it's all good. And this is going to probably take me some time to answer anyways.
Sorry for the long-winded question. Yeah, there we go. That's the best way I can describe my question.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So yes, I always knew I was good. My issues were like, why aren't other people seeing how good I am? And I think I was just not showing them that. And, you know, like I put up covers and people are like, oh my God, I didn't know Vicky could do this as well. Or like some people are like, it's amazing how much her voice has grown this last year. And it's like, yes and no, because some of these things, like I've been capable of doing them like for many years. I just didn't have the opportunity, because you're in one band, you're in the Agonist. That's like this like extreme melodic death metal band. You can't do all these different vocal styles in there. It doesn't make sense. Like first and foremost, we're creating music. Right. And I don't want to like create a song for me to show off. I'm going to do what's appropriate and what works. And it's like, and if I want to do like something different, I'll find a different outlet for it. So I wasn't doing that. And then I was like crying to myself, like, why aren't people seeing how good I am? You know? So there was that issue. And then like my biggest issue getting into music was, and the reason I didn't want to do the social media thing too much was like, I was thinking that certain things were expected of me. So I was thinking, oh, you got to go on Instagram and you got to post selfies of yourself, or check out these women they do like professional photo shoots once every month. And some of them, and I'm not going to like name call, but there are a lot of women that use their sexuality and use their good looks and their bodies and whatnot to gain followers. And that's cool. That's like a personal decision. I'm not going to frown upon it. However, I always felt like if I want to be taken seriously as a musician and build a career as a musician, I'm not going to do that because when I'm 50, I'm not going to be able to do that anymore. I mean, I could, but would anyone really want to see that? I don't know. Maybe it becomes comedic at that point. But anyways, my point is this is something I never wanted to do. But 10 years ago, instead of just being like, you know what, fuck this, just do the opposite. I used it as it kind of crippled me in a sense because I was like, well, I don't want to do that. Therefore, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just not going to post anything. I'm not going to say anything. And I felt like that worked against me. Whereas it's like, okay, you don't want to do that one thing. Find something else to do. Find something that inspires you and motivates you that you're passionate about and show the world that. And maybe, you know, it won't get the likes and the follows that a provocative sexual photo will, but the engagement, not the engagement, but like what's the word I'm looking for? The amount of people that like it for the right reasons is higher. And I still see this to this day because, like, I'm not saying I won't post a selfie of myself. I post a selfie with my face on it, and it will get a lot more comments and a lot more likes. And a few people that like, oh, marry me, Vicky, hearts, this and that, you know, and then I post my music and it gets like half the retention. But it is what it is. This is the world we live in. And I think you have to find that balance where it's like, don't do what society is expecting you to do. Don't do what other people are doing just because you see that this is the way to get followers and engagement and all that. Do what you want to do because otherwise you're going to hate it. And I don't want to live a life where I wake up every morning doing something I hate.
Absolutely. You know, a couple of things to your comments, and it actually goes into some sort of local drama I got into about 6 months ago. But you know, you talked about obviously with you doing like Twitch and stuff like that, you know, posting all your vocal covers and so forth, and some of the stuff you've done during the, you know, the pandemic and so forth. The thing that I've always found interesting about covers, and there's a band here locally that put out a couple of covers when that was like really the big thing. Like I Prevail put out that Taylor Swift song. And, you know, then that became sort of the gateway of like, oh, here's how we get found. You do a cover of a popular song, you know, whatever. But the thing was that, I think a lot of people don't realize is that I Prevail had basically a whole marketing plan behind it. Like Taylor Swift didn't have her music on any DSPs. So at that point, by having the hit single and it being the only one probably you're going to find on those, boom, they're going to be like the first thing. It's almost like when you do SEO stuff, like that's basically what they did. Secondly, they had a tour and a full record ready to go right behind it. So it's like the success of that was basically the Trojan horse to get everyone into the rest of their band. That's kind of the thing seemingly a lot of other bands didn't think of. They were just like, throw covers at the wall and just see if we get signed all of a sudden. It's like, that's not how that works. Right. Secondly, when bands, especially in this situation, there was the band here locally was a female or is a female fronted band. And the thing that was interesting to me was, you know, they put out a song by Deftones and Glassjaw, respectively. And a lot of the comments were very typical, which, I mean, in rock and metal, Daryl from Glassjaw and Chino are two of the most iconic sounding, like, you know who they are as soon as you hear them. So this person was getting mad going like, why can't I just sound like myself? Why do I have to be compared to these other people and these other men? And I'm like, because you did a fucking cover. Like, that's why you're being compared to those people, because you did a cover. Yeah. And that kind of got me into some hot water because it's like, well, that's sexist. And it's like, that's not sexist. That's literally like, if I were to put out a Sade cover and people would be like, you don't sound like Sade, you sound like a shitty dude. I'd be like, well, I am a shitty dude. And yeah, I'm not Sade. So like, the comparisons, let them happen.
The point is you made this comment not because it was a female. You would have made the same comment if it was a dude doing the cover. Right. So yeah.
So that's always something I thought to be interesting and had wondered, I guess, as a result of what I've gone through with this. how do you take that? Like when you see someone who maybe is surprised, like, oh, you did really, like you kind of talked on it actually about like, I love when people go, oh, I didn't know you could do this.
Yeah.
But is it kind of a double-edged sword for you at times where you're like, well, it's cool that like, I don't have like your Panama cover. To me, I was like, no one's going to sound like fucking Dave because like he just sounds like he does. Yeah. I think other than the dude from Steel Panther, I think that's like one of the only people that could get close. Yeah. But I love that like what you did was completely different. And to me, it's like, I don't have to compare the two. Like the one exists the way it does and the what you did exists the way it does.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of a weird thing for you as an artist. And I'm kind of trying to find the question, I guess, which is it hard for you to do something like a cover knowing that it almost seems like no matter what you do, it's not going to be taken, not well received because it's always being unfairly compared to something?
Well, yes and no. So it's like, first of all, like I started doing covers a long time ago before it was a thing of like bands being like, let me do a cover to skyrocket my career. Like I was just doing covers in my basement or at the time bedroom as a way to practice vocals. And this is something that I find hilarious when people just like leave a comment and sometimes they're like, oh, not as good as the original. It's like, obviously I love the original or I like it. I'm not going to say I love every single song I've covered, but there's something that I like about it that made me want to cover it. I'm not here singing other people's songs to be like, let me show you how I can sing your song better than you. Like, and I don't think anyone is doing that. And if they are, it's for the wrong reasons and it's disingenuous. But I mean, like, what do these people think? Like, they really think I'm taking a song that I hate and trying to do it better? It's like, no, it's like almost like a tribute to the original because I like it so much for whatever reason that I decided to cover it. So there's A, that, and there's B, I think I purposefully go for songs that are so different from what I already do or from what people expect me to do or sound like. I always did that. Like most of my covers are primarily male singers, and that's because most of my influences are male singers. Like growing up, I had this like sweet Disney voice, which I still have, and it's like my nature to sing that way. But I loved metal music. I loved heavy music. I was like, I want to learn how to sing with rasp and grit and have this powerful voice. How am I going to learn? I'm going to look at these classics. And there were a few women that were doing it and still doing it, but it was primarily men. And the greats were like primarily male fronted. So those were my influences. And that's why I did those covers. So I honestly like, yeah, when I see people say stuff like that, I'm like, you guys are just wrong, first of all. Second of all, when someone like criticizes my performance or they're like, you know, they have something really mean to say, it's usually just plain wrong. Like when someone says, oh, she can't sing, it's like, I can sing. I'm there, I'm singing, it's in key, it's correct. Maybe you don't like it, but just because you don't like it doesn't mean I can't do it. I'm doing it. You know, so it's kind of hard to be upset when all the negative comments have absolutely no basis whatsoever. It's just someone being very upset and offended for no reason at all. It almost makes me like laugh a little bit. And I don't want to be the person that's being mean, but it's like, well, if you give me that energy, that's the energy you're going to receive. You know, yeah.
It's funny you say that actually, because like doing this show, it's been interesting because like, you know, unlike a lot of my friends, like, you know, and friends that I've made through doing the show and so forth, it's like, you know, Doc is a great example. Like he does this medium and I love what he does and what he brings to it because he has 20 some odd years of touring. You know, my friend Dewey that does the Pure Pleasure podcast, you know, used to be in different bands and toured and did like Warped tours and all this stuff. So there is a connection that those people inherently will have with people like you that I don't. And like people will find the host more interesting or will give that person more like rope basically. Okay. So like I put out an episode with my friend Andrew that's in Dance Gavin Dance, but I've known him from Idola, the band he actually is like, it's his band. Yeah. And so it was one of those things, like I put out that episode recently and I booked Andrew's band like many years ago before Idola, before he was even in DGD or any of this other stuff. So there's a rapport we have with each other. And then he was one of the first guests that I had on this show. And so like, we're friends outside of this. We are friends. And it was one of those things where posting the new episode that we did, like with him, someone made the comment. They're like, you need to let him talk. Like, it's an interview. Let him talk more. I feel like you talk more than it. And I was like, that's the thing. This isn't an interview anymore. You are basically getting to hear me talk to a friend for like an hour and catch up with them. Like, I haven't seen this dude in basically since touring went away. So like this is the first time I'm really getting to face talk with him. So you're sort of getting me asking him questions, but it's more of just a hangout between me and a friend.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be like, are there times where your friend maybe talks more than you or vice versa? Absolutely. But like I almost wanted to go on this like long thing of like, don't tell me how I should interact with my friend. But then I was like, that's not the right kind of energy. This person doesn't know our relationship. So I was like, not going to go there.
Even if it's not your friend, though, like it is a podcast. And this is the beauty of podcasts, that because they are conversational, you have this like build up time that you can talk for an hour or 2 hours. Like some of them are like 3-4 hours long. You're not going to get that if just like the person that you're interviewing is talking. Like I can't talk for 3 hours by myself. Like, and who would want to hear that? So
you'd be surprised.
Yeah, maybe. But I feel like because of that exchange of conversation and that pause that I take or whoever takes, and we don't need to be friends for this, but to let you sort of explain your thought process, that opens up different things in my brain that I can explain to you. Whereas if you just ask me like a stale, like, here's one question, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to be done in like 5 minutes and that's it.
Right.
So like people need to understand this, or if they don't understand it, they could just go back to, I don't know, whatever else they were doing. They don't have to watch it. Like people just need to like, and this is what bothers me. Do I open videos on YouTube or whatever platform? Do I go on Spotify, listen to a song that I didn't like? All the time. But what do? I just skip it. I move on to the next one. Yep. I don't go dislike, well, this fucking sucks. You know, like, come on, people.
It's so funny the amount of time people will kind of go through to poo-poo on something. And, you know, I made the comment that's sort of how I started the show, was I got tired of seeing quote unquote interviews with bands or people that like I, in some instances, would kill to get. And the person's just squandering the opportunity for basically a free ticket or whatever. And I'm like, you didn't do any, like, you know, it'd be like if I was like, so the Agonist, how'd you guys get your band name? Like if I got a free ticket to go see you guys or whatever. And then I was like, I just asked bullshit. And it was like, really? Like now you're wasting my time and yours. And like, who cares? Like, come with something better. So like, I don't want to say contempt, but basically my disdain for finding so many of those is what led me to do this. I was like, fine, I think I can do better, so fuck it. So like I always tell people, like, if you think you can do better than me, hopefully you do the same thing I did. Maybe this is the jumping off point for you to start your show and you're going to be the next Joe Rogan. I don't know. Like, cool. Like at least I had a hand in it. But I think the hard part for me is I don't have that 20 years like a Doc Coyle of being told I suck, my band sucks, whatever, and I'm just used to it. It's weird for me to have some sort of a platform and people to be like, you're not good. And I'm like, that's that's your opinion. Sure, you're entitled to it. But the thing that I think I have to do sometimes, and maybe I do too much of, is like you're saying, trying to explain something because I want people who maybe have never heard the show try to understand, like, I did shitty tours. I used to book shows. I used to do this. So like, I do kind of know what I'm talking about. I'm just not a big name that you've heard of. So where you go, oh, you have credibility in this space.
Right.
And so I think that's the hard part sometimes is it's almost like imposter syndrome, where we will kind of maybe overcompensate because we want to be accepted and we want to be liked. And I think that kind of becomes a thing, which actually goes to the thing that I jotted down. You know, as you were kind of talking about people who are really good at something and maybe just, you know, don't know that they are, talking about going back and forth with things. When you said that for the first time, I've never thought of this, but I wonder if that's like a weird undiagnosed form of like body dysmorphia, but in a different capacity.
It might be. It very well might be, because I can't even comprehend that. How can you possibly be a good singer or good musician and not know it deep down? Like, you can be the humblest person in the world And you should be humble. Like, if you see how I talk about myself on social media, I don't go out bragging like I'm the best, I'm the goat, you know, like I don't do that stuff. Actually, I'll say something like that when I like seriously fuck up something, because like sometimes I'm on stream and I'll go to like hit a note and I'll miss it and I'm like, yup, that was best take ever, you know. Like it's good to be sarcastic about these things, but it's like I said, you should have a humbling sort of attitude about it, because there will always be someone better than you. And even if there won't be, even if like, I don't know what, you can't like, there's no such thing as the best of the best, because it is subjective at the end of the day. As long as you're like checking all the boxes, like, okay, you're on key, you have great control with your voice, you have great emotion when you sing, you're a great performer, you're already in that top whatever 1% or 0 point whatever percent. At that point, it's just personal preference. Some people will say you're the best singer in the world, or other people say someone else is the best singer in the world. So that doesn't exist. But going back to what you said, I can't even comprehend how someone can be so good and not know it deep down. But maybe because some people are like super humble, they don't show that to you. Maybe they do know it and they just don't want to show it to you. I'm hoping. Because if you don't know it, then yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's something that like you need to go to therapy or whatever and figure it out, because like you cannot live your life thinking that you're not good at something that you are absolutely incredible at. That's sad. Not sad. It's just it's a waste. It's a waste of your talent and all your hard work, and like it's not cool. Like I don't know. This is like not my field at all, but
it's just it was so, and like literally for those that will go back and watch it, when I started typing it, you could literally see the light bulb moment in my head where I was like,
yeah,
body dysmorphia. But like for people who like, it's not about how you look, but it's I guess about how you
your
perform
output.
or something. Yeah, or something. Yeah, like I don't know. It was just it was such an, and that's why I kind of love having more of just a conversation now, as opposed to like writing out a list of questions and guiding you the whole way. Because then it's like now that's going to be something I kind of take with me, and I just kind of go like, like how does something like that manifest itself in other capacities in our life? Like, you know, going to therapy, it's like, okay, like you talk about these things, and there are people who like, now I'm going to try to Google that somehow and see what I can discover in that capacity. But, you know, something else we've kind of touched on, and you just sort of said with, you know, doing something on Twitch and streaming and so forth, you know, I've kind of started slowly getting into it because I'm technologically a dunce. But I realized I could take this and just send it to Twitch. So it pretty much does everything I need to. It's just like the bits and stuff like that I'm kind of learning about. But it's one of those where I feel like it's interesting to see so many musicians, you know, going to this platform now to do everything from, you see like Porter from Atreyu and the vocalist from like Moss to Flames, you know, they do like art Mondays, or like they do art days where they just draw stuff or graphic design. You see different people doing vocal warm-ups or singing exercises, or people playing video games, like just seeing so many different people showcasing who they are as people, and just kind of getting to know these, you know, artists basically in different capacities. And the thing that I think is interesting about it, and I kind of wanted to pose it to you a little bit, was, you know, I feel like it's the first time I've not seen a segregation of music scenes anymore by genre. I feel like the communities are just accepting of anybody who is doing something. Whereas I feel like if I were to like doing the show, sometimes I'm looked at as predominantly the hardcore metal guy, but it's like, you know, I have Aaliyah skateboards behind me. I love rap. I love hip hop. I love all different kinds of stuff. And I love hardcore metal. But I feel like so many people are the gatekeepers or whatever, are just like, well, I only listen to melodic black and death metal, and this isn't true, TRVE or whatever the hell. And it's like, I feel like the reality of our music scenes and music culture is that we are so diversive and dividing of people based on music and things they like. Whereas I feel like Twitch is one of the first times I've ever seen a community of people come together and support someone regardless of what scene or background they come from. Have you noticed that?
Yes, I have noticed that. And I think a big reason for that is that music is still a little bit of an underdog on Twitch. Like, it's a platform that was created primarily for gaming. So the biggest accounts on there are gaming. And I think the last 2 years, music has just grown and grown. So there is this like unity because it's still the underdog. And when it comes to metal music, I feel like it's always gonna be the underdog in like popular society. It's not gonna become the mainstream music ever as a genre. And I think that's what really upsets me, going to like your whole gatekeeper comment, that really upsets me with people like this is that this genre of music is all about bringing people together that feel like they're outcasts, that feel like they don't belong, that, you know, grow up listening to this kind of music because everyone else is following this sort of stereotype and they feel like they're not a part of it. So they turn to like metal music for that reason. And then you come into a community that's going to do the same shit to you that other people were doing to you. Like, it absolutely blows my mind. And I feel though like that is a little bit more of hiding behind closed doors sort of mentality. Like, if you actually go to a show, a metal show, I think people are actually like very united and very like moshing and having fun and like this and that. No one's going to turn around because you wore a t-shirt from a band that they don't like and be like, "Hey, what are you doing here? Get the fuck out of here wearing that t-shirt." You know, that doesn't happen in real life. It's like a very like internet thing.
Mhm.
And then I feel like it's also maybe a thing of like behind closed doors, like in the industry that you're never going to hear about. But I think in real life, metal is very accepting. And we're seeing more of that on Twitch because it is a representation of people's real life. Like when I turn on my camera and my mic, I'm sitting right here in my basement. Nothing changes, you know? So I think that's why there's that support where it's like, and also you're kind of taking back control. That's another thing I was going to say. You have this platform that enables you to broadcast to anywhere in the world. And I'm thinking about like 15, 20 years ago, you didn't have that opportunity to showcase who you are as a person. You would have to wait to get this like really cool interview that's going to go on TV, like MTV at the time, or I think like when I lived in Greece, we had like Metal Hammer that had a segment that interviewed vocalists or musicians. Or you would have to actually be like on television or whatever. Like you would have to wait for a media outlet to come and interview you and ask you the right questions so you can show people your personality. Oh, what just happened there?
I don't know.
Oh, there you are. Okay, sorry. The window just disappeared. Very strange. I thought it cut off. Sorry. I was like looking at you and all of a sudden like it was gone. Okay. So you had to wait for those opportunities and you might never get them. But now it's like, I could just show you who I am right here. This is me. Take it or leave it, you know? And I think that's a very powerful tool in these days. And it's very much needed because it's a little bit less fake compared to other social media because it's all real time. It's go, go, go. You can't go back and edit something you said or something you did. So how good are you at hiding? How good are you at faking it? Probably not. That's why majority of what you see is real people being real.
Yeah.
It would be draining. Imagine going on stream every single day, streaming for 3 hours and pretending to be someone you're not. That would be horrible. So we don't see that too much.
I think it's kind of a catch-22, I feel like, at times, because I feel like, you know, kind of going back to the whole thing again of kind of being on 24/7, you know, I think about, like, I'm very much like you are or were, where I'm like, like I've always said, if I could get to the point where like I can hire somebody, like the show ever gets that successful where I can literally hire a social media person, I'm probably deleting Facebook so I don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then I would probably, oddly enough, I would probably keep Twitter because I actually do like, I feel like I get a better prism of the world because of the different accounts I follow and the different people's perspectives on things.
Yeah.
May not agree with them, but like there are a lot of different musicians that I follow that have different political meanings, but I love the fact that they are still friends and they're able to have discourses, which would almost typically you would see, well, fuck you, I block you. But it's like the next day, like they're talking about something else. They're still friends because they understand
that's cool to see,
disagreement happens. And I'm like, but I think again, maybe it's due to the age of like, that's what we grew up in. Like you have disagreements, you talk through it, and then you just kind of go, okay, you and I are going to see eye to eye on that. Like it's cool, but maybe we can have a discourse and maybe you can teach me something that I didn't know about your thing or whatever, or vice versa. But I love seeing that. So to me, I know Twitter is pretty much a cesspool and it's kind of got all the worst things of everything, but the way I've kind of curated my Twitter, I do like what it does and how I can kind of get news very quickly. And Instagram, I like for the sake of it's interesting. I try to use it a little bit more for like the medium it was supposed to be, which is just here's a photo, quick little caption, whatever. But I like that because it's a different form of creativity to see how people use it. But Facebook is just fucking garbage.
It's getting worse and worse too with putting out your content. Like I remember like 7 years ago, I would post a photo and it would get thousands and thousands of likes or a video or whatever. And now where there's no doubt about it, like career wise, I'm way higher up than I used to be 7-8 years ago, and I have more followers, and my photos are getting less engagement and less likes than back then because of this whole like, oh, you have to pay to promote your content. It's absolute garbage. Like how can I have 4 or 5 times the followers and the same amount of likes, if not less? That doesn't, no, it just doesn't work. And every other platform I see the growth on every other one, but not Facebook, you know.
I would almost pose the question to you because like I have one of my tattoo artists is what I like to call like, you know, a town celebrity. Like he is in high demand. Like I just went to him today to go book an appointment and we're friends and I'm the first week of February. Like that's how far out he's booked. And so it's one of those things where, you know, I see like his photo, like his post just blowing up. Like, cause he's grown his brand. He's grown his name over the last, since I've known him. And, you know, I made a comment one day to him when we were hanging out. I was like, it must be so fucking like, I sort of wish my business pages would be as successful as yours. But then I also see that like your shit is just constantly going.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to interact with that. I was like, so part of me is jealous because like, I want that success. But part of me is also like, no, I don't. I don't want to have to deal with like being who people expect me to be, I guess, or whatever. Like, I don't know, just this weird expectation of like, well, when you have the hundreds of thousands of likes and the hundreds of comments and stuff like that, it's like, well, then I feel like it's expected that you have to interact with that in some capacity because then, like you said, it's tied to your livelihood. So now you have to do that. Otherwise, people are going to have the adverse reaction. And I feel like that would be stressful.
Yeah. Well, which brings me back to what I said in the beginning. When it comes to your social media, do the things you want to do and show the people the things you want to show them. Because if you don't, then it's just going to be draining you every day. So let's say like you start your social media and you're like, I'm going to respond to every single comment that someone leaves me. And I've seen accounts that do that. It's like, you're not going to be able to keep up because like if you grow and you literally post a photo and you get 1,000 comments, are you going to respond to all 1,000 comments? Like that's absolutely absurd. So like I do respond to comments sometimes, like the ones that make a little bit more effort. Like if I post a cover or an original song and someone's like, wow, amazing work, I'm not going to respond to that comment. But if someone leaves like a whole paragraph going in depth about what they liked about it and like analyzing them, I'll be like, okay, this person spent a lot of time. I'll comment, but because I want to comment, not because it's expected.
Right.
And that feels okay. And I'm okay with that. And I can keep up with that.
I guess it's more about, again, another therapy tool that I had is managing expectations, which I think just goes into life in general. Like, you know, if you can set someone's expectations and manage your own, then I think no one will be disappointed because you've already set that expectation of what to expect out of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So something that I wanted to touch on, because I think it's an interesting talking point. You know, you had Matt from Vox and Hops / Cryptopsy on your stream like 4 or 5 days ago. Yeah. I was a guest on his show, And it's kind of weird because I like talking to other podcasters. But he's sort of like, again, like the Dot Coils and so forth, where he is in the world as well. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those where I don't think people understand what it's like to kind of have to sort of lead a conversation or to interview somebody until you have to do it. How did you find that experience of doing something like that with somebody, especially on a stream where you're having comments come in, you're trying to facilitate the questions maybe that are coming up that you're like, oh, that's a good one, I'll get to that in a minute, and still keep a natural conversation going with somebody?
I think it's easier for me to have natural conversations with people. That's why. Like, if you told me, can you become an interviewer tomorrow or in a month? I'd say no. Because, like, I think I have that experience that I know which questions bother me so much that I wouldn't want to ask anyone else those questions. And there's a few that we get all the time as musicians that, like, okay, it's been 10 years. This is the 100th time someone has asked me this. Like, you could just Google it and find that information, So I think I have, because of that, because of like being interviewed so many years by so many different people, I know what not to ask. And I think it might be difficult if I don't know the person at all, never met them, I don't know their interests. Maybe it'd be like trying to like, break a wall a little bit. Or break the ice or whatever, like trying to get to know them during the conversation. Mm-hmm. Whereas like with Matt, for example, or other people that I plan to have on the stream in the future, I've met them, we've played a show together, or we've toured together. So I kind of like know, okay, just by having a conversation, like what this person is interested in talking about, because that's also the beauty of streaming, that it could go on for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, because you're having fun, because you're into it, and because the crowd is into it. So if you know what to stay away from, that people are just like, oh, yawn, I think you're good.
Yeah, it's funny. I the last time I talked to Porter, because he just started doing his Twitch stream, he was like, let's do it on that. So I was like, all right. So the kind of ground rule was like, all right, we're going to give John whatever the time he needs, and then, we'll kind of do a normal stream or whatever at that point after that. So I was trying to be cognizant of time, because I know he likes to be done 3 hours or so. So we talked for about an hour and 40 minutes, kind of covered a gamut of things. And then I was like, boom, there's my episode.
Yeah.
But then we talked for another 4 hours on stream. And everyone and the weird part is like, with Discord, like I'm still learning Discord stuff and all that crap too. But it was crazy because there were people who were like, oh my God, I could have listened to another 2-3 hours of that. It was so all of it was engaging, the way you guys were both able to come back to things you talked about, like, and just covering so many different topics. And I was just like, and it reminded me, like, again, why I love the medium, but more to the fact of what I think we're missing and what I see when you have some of these longer form conversations, which is why I've really kind of started to break away from the 20-30 minute press junket. Because it's like, I know how to do that, and I think I'm pretty good at getting a good 20 minutes out of somebody. But this is where, like, 30 minutes in with someone, that's where you start kind of getting some familiarity. It's almost like having first date with someone on my end, because it's like, you and I have never talked before. Like, I can find things out about you because of the internet being what it is, but you don't know who I am or what I'm going to ask you. And there's this sense of trust and vulnerability on both ends.
Yeah.
And you hope that at the end of it, you both walk, or at least I do, where I walk away going like, all right, I hope that wasn't a huge waste of that person's time, where they're like, hey, publicist, never have me do that dude's show again, because that sucked. But it's one of those where I feel like, I know for me, like, a big thing that was nice was during the pandemic when everyone couldn't see anyone, I was doing more of these.
More of these.
And I tended to find that it was so nice because I still got that interaction with people that we were all losing. And
okay. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say about what you said. Hopefully, it doesn't reach a point where like someone's upset or whatever. I wanted to say this about interviews, and I feel like this has shifted since like maybe the 80s or 90s or something, where people need to be allowed also to say like, hey, I'm not comfortable talking about this, or I don't like this, or I don't agree. Like going to your conversation about Twitter, how you see people talking, sharing their views, and they don't agree, and then they're still friends at the end of the day. I think we need to be promoting this type of behavior, even in interviews, where it's like, it can't always go smoothly. Like, then it's not a genuine conversation. And if we're just agreeing on everything all the time, then life would be pretty boring. And I think people need to step outside that comfort zone a little bit and be like, you know what? I don't like this. I don't want to talk about this, or I don't agree with you, or whatever. But I think this is the whole social media thing where, like, you have to present this perfect version of yourself that, like, I'm always pleasant and I always smile and I have the perfect relationship and me and my husband, we never fight. You know, like, I wake up looking like this. I don't wear makeup, natural beauty, like all these like societal things that have built up where it's just like making you feel that if you don't present this perfect image and personality that you're lesser than other people. And it seeps into interviews as well, where it's like, no, like I have said this. I said this before the EP run. Thankfully, it hasn't happened yet, but I said this. If anyone, especially on tours, because this happens on tours where the thing that you said, where someone gets a press pass so they get to come to the show for free just because they're interviewing you and they haven't done their research. And so I'll have like an interview and someone's holding a piece of paper and they're like, I'm here with, you know, and they have to read it off the paper. And I'm sitting there being nice about it. I said to myself, if this happens again, that's it. Like, I'm speaking up because this is not cool. This is uncomfortable. And we should call people out that do that. Like, you don't know my name or my band, then what are you doing here?
Well, I mean, I think in full transparency that, because I think it's sort of it's just full transparency. So I have no problem. I have no qualms talking about it.
Yeah.
I would say probably a good 65 to 70% of the people I have on the show, I probably have barely heard, like, straight up. The email came through, your publicist followed back up because, I mean, I get a ton of emails. So I just sometimes, and my old co-host still has access. So sometimes he'll read them and then I just don't know that they're new. Sure. And it was like, hey, following up on this, think, you know, you would love to talk to Vicky. She's really great. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, you know, and the publicist doing what they do, you know, blows up the bit. Oh, it's the best and all these buzzwords and so forth. And you're like, okay, like
adjectives.
Yep. And I was like, yeah, I'll talk to Vicky. I was like, I have no idea who the Agonist is.
That's fine.
And then it was funny. She goes, well, they're really big overseas. And I was like, yeah. And then all of a sudden she was like, and Lisa, I was like, somebody else from another band, from Arch Enemy. And I was like, oh yeah, wasn't there like a thing like a couple years? She goes, yeah. And I was like, okay, yes. I do know of the band. I don't necessarily like, and I've made no bones about it that like doing this show has maybe turned me off a lot on listening to music because I feel like it's work, because I'd have to find something in it to talk to you about that maybe hopefully no one else has or very few people have. So it becomes this thing where I'm like, oh, I don't want to listen to anything. I want to listen to podcasts. I want to hear people's stories. And in that regard, I've always said, I will talk to anyone because I think everyone has a story and there's something that I can probably talk to you about where I can go, okay, now we're on same level. We can talk about something interesting and then go from there. Yes. And in that capacity, that's what I've really strived to do, where it's like, but I don't want anyone to feel bad, like where it's like, well, I can tell you didn't like that band. It's like, I probably don't I don't actively listen to a lot of the bands that I have because I just don't listen to it.
So here's the difference. First of all, this is your format and you want to talk to people as people. So that doesn't necessarily mean you need to go back and listen to everyone's discography. Like, nobody has those hours in the day. And that's fine. That's fine. And also, like, that's totally cool too. Like, if everyone on the planet knew me or my band, then I wouldn't be out here doing promo and talking to people because everyone already knows me. So why am I doing this? You know,
right.
That's totally cool too. Like, I think people need to let go of this idea like, oh, you don't know who I am. It's fine if you don't know who I am. This is why we're talking. And after this, you're going to know who I am. So that's cool too. What I was criticizing is people that come in interviewing about your latest release, for example, and they have to read it off the paper, like what the album title was, what your name is, what your band is, and they have made mistakes, like not saying the Agonist, like someone once said the antagonist, or, you know, they've made mistakes. And I'm like, you're literally here. You got into the show for free based on the fact that you're going to interview me, and you couldn't spend, 30 minutes, 1 hour of your day to do a very light research, listen to the music a little bit, come in a little bit prepared. Because this is your format. This is your platform. This is what you're doing.
Yeah.
So like going back to us, if you had done the same thing and you were asking me about the music and you were like, I didn't actually have time to listen to it, so why don't you tell us about it?
No.
I would have been like, what are you doing, bud?
No, that's the one thing for me that I think it's pretty clear. Like thankfully, and I'm going to say this, because I always get these, it's Napalm that came out. It's coming out on, right? Yeah. Napalm record. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this. Kudos to your label and your publicist. They are one of the few that when I get a promo copy of something that actually attach the fucking lyrics, because 9 times out of 10, I talk to vocalists and it's not that you are unarticulate when you're singing or, doing your heavier vocals, but sometimes I'd rather look at something, no music, no nothing, and just, read. Because to me, yes, you are writing something that's based on, it was informed on the music. Like, oh, here's this cool like riff thing, and I could do this, and here's this melody, and so on and so forth. But sometimes to me, especially in aggressive music, the thing that I love is when you can look at something and go, okay, here's a really cool theme. Here's a really cool lyric. What is this person trying to say? And, I was on, it's funny you say like not everyone has the time to go through someone's discography. My old co-host, he has a show called Discography Discussion. That's exactly what we did. And everything that we were doing when I joined the show was basically death metal bands, which I was like, I hate this genre because it almost seems like the point of pride for it is sound as shitty as possible. When I'm like, do you not have any fucking budget to like just make something sound a little bit better? Like, I know you're technically proficient at what you're doing. And I think it was Cattle Decapitation where, as the band progressed and, their newer records, I'm like, this sounds really good. It's got hooks for what it is. And even going through and reading all the fucking lyrics that are in that stuff, it's like, there's some really profound things being said. Unfortunately, when you just hear like almost a rhythmic percussive instrument done vocally, you're not going to pick that apart. And I don't care what anyone says, you're not really going to be able to understand that. Yeah. But that's why I, as a music fan, want to go, okay, what are you fucking saying? What are you trying to get across? So to me, I was so stoked when I had the PDF with all the lyrics. And I was like, thank fucking God, more labels and publicists need to get on this trend. So at least I can talk to you about something. For sure.
And I think it depends on the band too, and what their focus is. And in metal, not a lot of bands focus on lyrics. Lyrics come, secondary. They're like, well, I need words to do my vocals on and whatever. It's death metal, make it gruesome. Let's talk about killing people and whatever. That's fine. And for some bands, they're really important. And I think I tend to place that focus like with our publicists too. I said that they're important. I sent in the lyrics, and maybe that's like another reason why they made sure to send them in as well. I did mention that it's a concept EP. So once you say the word concept, people are like, okay, lyrics are even more important here now because it's a concept. So perhaps that added to it, but I do appreciate it always when I talk to someone that cares about lyrics, because it's not common in metal. Like most people are all about like the technicalities, the guitar work, the drum work, the vocal work. They don't focus on the words as much, where I think that's a shame because words are important. Telling a story is important.
Well, I think like the thing for me that I've always thought was kind of funny about that, the genre itself of kind of more technical, like death metal and stuff like that. A lot of times I feel like it's so akin, especially in the breath work, to rap. Because instead of being, like here's a rock song, it's a 2.5 minute like song. Here's your verse, chorus, bridge, outro, whatever. I'm not saying like those elements aren't there, but when you have like, you look at a band like Demi Borgir and they have like a 6-7 minute long song and it's kind of progressive. It's got symphonic elements and it's almost telling a story unto itself. And then the song ends, but the keys lead into the next song. And it's very, I've always said it's very cinematic. Mm-hmm. And so in that capacity, I've always been like, okay, well, you can't like, what good is a movie if you don't know the fucking plot? And I've always felt like my love of hip hop, more so like old school hip hop, where it's more storytelling and kind of autobiographical. I feel like to a degree, And unfortunately, like you said, a lot of people don't focus on the lyrics or the vocalist really. But I feel like a lot of the things you're doing, because it's harder to find a spot like where you know you're going to do this or land on this cymbal hit or whatever, that I feel like it's so rhythmically approached that you basically are writing hip hop just over not hip hop traditional beats.
It's so funny that you say that. That's why I'm smiling like an idiot the entire time. But like, that's my number one response to like metal fans, like true metal fans that hate rap and hip hop. I'm like, dude, just take off the distortion from anyone's screams and you'll see that they're just rapping, really. Especially if the band is like very like groovy in their rhythms. It's all, and a lot of bands like rhyme too with their screams. It really just is. It's like the same foundation. And especially when you have a lot of words that you, because of that, like let's say it's like a fast paced like screaming part, you need a lot of lyrics. So suddenly like you need to start telling a story, because if you're not telling a story, then I think you'll hit writer's block, where it's like, okay, I wrote a verse and it's cool, but where do I go from here? Because we don't have a story in mind. But once you have a story in mind, it's like, oh, here's my intro, beginning, middle, end, boom, boom, boom. Like I've written songs, lyrics like in 10 minutes sometimes, because I had the story in my head and inspiration struck or whatever. And it's like, boom, here you go, a full page of lyrics. And I certainly see that like that metal and old school hip hop have a lot of similarities. They started from the same place. A lot about like real life problems and people talking about their issues. So it's like to see that separation grow more and more in today's society, like really upsets me, because it's a shame. It's a shame.
Yeah.
They're both great genres of music and have great things to offer, sometimes for the same reason, sometimes for different reasons. It's like we shouldn't be shitting on anything, really.
Well, I think that's like one of the, like, very recently, the episode, it won't be out still for a little bit, but like I did an episode with or a chat with Malcolm from the band X Unlocking the Truth. You may remember them. They were like the 3 African American kids playing metal in Times Square, like that went viral, like back in 2013 or 2014. And then everyone was like, "Oh, the new underground metal scene, the saviors. These kids are gonna like poised to save metal, basically." As often headlines do to just get people to click on it and so forth. Just like Trivium was probably 10 years before that. Oh, these young kids are going to save metal. But it's funny because like now he's merged into sort of this trap hip hop kind of stuff that sort of melds between like a Juice World and Trippie Redd and some of the stuff like that's more of like what he's kind of growing up with. But it's funny in talking to him, because I was like, I remember sending the publicist at the time, I was like, I am probably, out of anyone who will talk to this kid, I am probably like the person. Like I love metal, hardcore. I also love hip hop and all that kind of shit. So I am probably like like the Venn diagram for this kid is me. And it was weird because like when I was talking about some of the hip hop that I was really into and got me into it, and then versus like now my wife kind of like listening to a lot of more of the newer stuff, he goes, it's so weird to hear you say like, oh, this is old. Like I don't even know I don't really fuck with those artists because I don't know them. And I'm like, but then I was like, he goes like, you know, like you're saying like Juice World, like those are my people of like who's hip hop. And I'm like, all right, that's the difference in our age and absolutely like, but like, I'm not going to negate what you're saying is what inspires you or what informs you, but it is weird that there's a little bit of such a gap of like, here's what I consider true hip hop, and then what you're considering is what is hip hop now, which absolutely is.
Yeah. See, this is a little bit of a difference though with metal music and hip hop world, that I feel like in metal, we're still holding on to those like legends. You still see like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath headlining all the festivals, right? To a point where it's like, can this like stop a little bit? Can we push some newer bands a little bit more? Because you know these bands aren't going to be around forever. It's a different thing to honor them and respect them. It's a different thing to put them over and put them on the top. All like, and I have a lot of friends where they're like, I'm a huge, you know, Black Sabbath fan, but I've seen them 10 times already. I want to see other bands. So we do that in metal, but in hip hop, it's the opposite. It's all about who the new person is. And a lot of these young rappers, if you ask them about, you know, like the stuff that you grew up on, they'll be like, I don't know who that is, because it's not a thing in their world to keep mentioning the greats and keep putting them over. It just
I think that kind of goes back to what I was sort of getting at with Twitch and kind of the lack of gatekeepers in the communities, because I feel like I agree with what you're saying with like the whole, like, you go to, and I'm so jealous. And one of my goals is to get this show to the level where I can go to like a Vakken or a, Rock Am Ring, Rock Am Park, whatever, as media, and go see the festivals that I wish we fucking had over here, where it's like, yo, here's Def Leppard and Demi Borgir back to back. Like, you never will fucking see that here in the States, because they're just too close-minded to do some shit like that. Yeah. But I love the fact that overseas they are more appreciative of the legacy acts. But I agree with you where and I think the obviously you have to have the big names that are going to sell the tickets and also have the money to put forth a big budget production show that gets the people, the tens of thousands of people that come to these things. Yeah. But the biggest thing that I don't see, and I've always seen it in hip hop, and I never see it in rock and metal, the cosign, the frequent collaborations. I don't ever fucking see that in rock and metal. And I don't know if it starts at the top at the industry, like the managers and so forth, who are like putting it into your ear where it's like, here's your piece of the pie. And if you do this, then you're going to get an even smaller piece of the small piece you already have. Whereas I feel like hip hop and rap are like, let's go get the fucking bag. Like, you want $75K for a verse? Cool. Cause I know my song's going to go fucking big, and then I'm going to get my royalties from my pubs and all that shit. And I'm going to make the money back anyway. So it's just, it don't mean nothing for me to do that. And I feel like that's the biggest difference, is everyone is so afraid of losing whatever little money they're getting that they lose sight of doing something fun and doing something that could open more doors. And I feel like that's the biggest thing that I see that just frustrates me, where I'm like, take a page out of what they're doing. Co-star.
Yeah. And also, like, I feel like perhaps some bands are afraid, or some artists are afraid of losing their spot, but I don't know. It's all very upsetting. I think we should be honoring younger bands and putting them over. And this is how the genre is going to stay alive. And if we're just holding on to like this old school idea of metal, which I absolutely love, I grew up on that, but it's like not a lot of people listen to it, not a lot of young kids. And we need some of these like crossover bands that have like poppy elements to like help expand the genre and get more people into it. Like, so super funny thing that happened that I'm sure you saw, like when Ozzy Osbourne collaborated with Post Malone, and there were all these tweets of people being like, whoa, it's so great of Post Malone to like show us a great new artist, Ozzy Osbourne.
They did the same with Kanye when he had Paul McCartney on.
Right. And metal people were so upset over this. And like, I thought it was hilarious. I was like, okay, this 15-year-old doesn't know who Ozzy Osbourne is. So, like, I'm not going to get mad at her. It's culture. It's pop culture. He's not as relevant right now as Post Malone or whoever else. And it's like, they never heard of him. I'm going to laugh about it. And I'm going to be like, this is cool because, hey, look, the metal genre, the rock genre is being featured in the pop and hip hop world. Why is this a bad thing? Like, I don't know. Like, people need to let go of this idea of like, I don't know.
I saw it recently. Post Malone, speaking of, announced his Posty Fest that he does every year in Texas. And this year had Turnstile, which, if you're not familiar with that band, they come from the hardcore scene, but they're starting to incorporate like 90s alternative and kind of like just they're doing whatever the fuck they want, really. And it's great. Like, they did an EP that basically half of that EP is now the full length that they put out, but they're turning heads and they're starting to break out of just being a hardcore band. And some people are like, yo, this is so refreshing to see someone doing something so different from everyone else, and it's getting attention that them and Gatecreeper are on Posties Fest alongside bands like, Post Malone and like fucking NERD and Trippie Redd and all these other people. And it got picked up by the metal sites, and a lot of people are like, oh, I would go, but I would leave as soon as they're done. And I'm like, why? Why would you do that? Like, go. Maybe you're going to find somebody else that day that you actually would fuck with and be like, yo, this is cool. Me personally, it reminds me sort of like Post Malone is almost kind of doing and curating what the Warped Tour, the spot that Warped Tour is missing, where it's like, cool, he's somewhere in between a bunch of other shit. God only knows who will show up with him and perform. He can play instruments, as he's shown. So it's like, why wouldn't you want to get behind a pop artist who actually came from the metal world and we shunned him? And then he was like, well, fuck it, I'm going to go do hip hop then, and became the biggest fucking dude ever. So it's like, Post Malone is such a great example of what's wrong with rock and metal fans, because we got rid of him because they were like, oh, whatever. And then he's like, well, I'm going to go do this other thing I love. And then became even bigger than he ever would have been in this scene. And it's one of those, like, to see him put out things that he loves, where it's like, yeah, here's Gatecreeper, like a fucking sort of thrashy metal band, death metal band. I don't know if anyone's going to fuck with it at my thing, but like, I love it, so I'll be there.
Yeah.
And even seeing, Bring Me just announced their European run with A Day to Remember and Lorna Shore. And it's one of those where Lorna Shore, for like a hot minute there, was like the most talked about band between TikTok and all this kind of stuff, and being in memes with that new single they put out. And it's like, you can shit on that all you want for them getting all that exposure, but look at what it did for them. They're now on one of the biggest tours within our respected scene, and all it's going to do is bring more eyes to the underground of the bands they're going to then go tour with. Like, why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you want a band that you supposedly love to get some fucking attention so more people will go see the thing you like? I've never understood it. It's so fucking ass backwards.
It really is. It really is. And it's like, I don't know, people like to have this thing where it's like, I knew you when you were underground, and you're mine. It's like the Gollum thing with my precious,
Yeah.
It's disturbing, because it's like, and I go through this with like my own small community too sometimes, where I'm like, things are growing and it gives me less time to like be on my Discord and like engage with people and stuff like that. And they always have to tell me like, don't worry about it, Vicky. Like, we just want to see you like succeed. We're here to help you succeed. It's not about, oh, you couldn't do a hangout this week. You couldn't put out more content this week because you're busy. Like, we just want to see you grow and want to see you succeed. And I feel really grateful for that, because yes, as you grow, there's not enough time in the day to do everything. So I think people need to like be more accepting of that and be like happy that like the artist you loved and that you discovered before the rest of the world is growing right now. Assuming, of course, that, they didn't completely change their sound and like sell out and all those other components. But like, I never got that attitude either. I think it sucks. It's just poor human behavior.
Kind of been wrapping up because I don't want to keep you too much longer. I don't know if you got something behind me.
Yeah.
So I see some of your Batman paraphernalia behind you. How do you feel about the upcoming Robert Pattinson Batman?
I don't know. I'll have to wait and see it. I thought it was a little weird that, I don't know, he's very skinny in the trailer. Like, this is Batman. He's supposed to be this like towering, huge figure. I don't know. I feel weird about it.
I really liked him in The Lighthouse. I thought that was a really movie.
I was legitimately excited when they announced him, because he's one of those actors that everyone's like, oh, Twilight, whatever. But I always felt like he has a lot in him as an actor.
Yeah.
And he's got that like, jawline too, that you're like, okay, I could see him playing, Batman. But I didn't expect this direction. And I mean, it's just a trailer, so I don't know. But
it almost looks like they went with like more of like the noir style for the movie.
Yeah. Maybe it'll be good. I really don't know, but who's your favorite Batman?
So it's hard. Like, I have always said, I think Michael Keaton is one of the few that has been able to pull off both. But I think the problem is, like, I think Val Kilmer was a great Batman, or a great Bruce Wayne, bad Batman. I think Christian Bale was a great Batman, horrible Bruce Wayne. George Clooney, great Bruce Wayne, terrible Batman. Yeah. Like, so they've never really had the dichotomy or the duality of both, where it's like you see the one being one or the other. And I feel like, and I know it's kind of shitty to be like, oh, well, it's obviously the first person you ever saw played on a theater or in a movie, but I really feel like Keaton kind of was able to play both, where he was able, you could believe him as being this rich person, who has a storied past that leads him into being this other thing. honestly, I feel like what they need to do, and I don't know how you do this, because like I feel like the benchmark for this has been set with this person, but Robert Downey Jr. being Iron Man, I think was like the first time I've really seen someone where you're like, oh, he is both 100% killed it. And it's like, I've not really seen anyone really be able to do that when you have to play a civilian and a superhero.
There's been a few that have been like a really good cast, good choice, but then maybe it's like the writing that's bad. Like I feel about that, like I feel that way a little bit about Spider-Man. Like I think
who's your favorite Spider-Man so far?
Well, I think Tom Holland is a great choice as a person to play Spider-Man, because he's got, you know, he's short, he's small, and you know, I think it's a great choice. I just think the writing wasn't great. Whereas like I think the writing was better in the first
Tobey Maguire
series.
Playing a 30-year-old teenager.
What?
I said with Tobey Maguire playing a 30-year-old teenager.
Yeah. So I think the movies were better then, but I don't know. This is all personal opinion, obviously. And like going back to Batman, I do agree with you. I also really enjoyed Christian Bale, but I just think like Christian Bale is a phenomenal actor. Like I love him in everything he does. And I think again, like the Dark Knight movies were exceptional. Actually, Batman Begins is like my favorite, surprisingly, because I love origin stories. But then the thing like with Ben Affleck, for example, too, I thought he looked great as Batman. And he got like super big. I didn't really like him as Bruce Wayne. So like I do agree with you. It's hard to find the perfect role like that does both, you know.
Yeah, I think I think that's the hard part, but I think it almost speaks to the human side of things where, you know, like kind of bring it again full circle. So like, you know, you had kind of talked about how if you're pretending to be somebody and you go on a stream for 3 hours and that's not really who you are, like that's work. It'd be so hard to do. I think that's why it's hard for us to find the perfect so-and-so, because in the comic, they could draw the person and they could make the dialogue. They could steer it however they wanted to make you believe both. Whereas in a movie, you have to believe both sides of this person. And it's like, okay, do you want the big hulking person so you believe him as a superhero, but then you see him and he's not a believable millionaire, all this kind of stuff. There were moments, ironically, and it's maybe a scene in I think it's The Dark Knight Rises. That's the one with Joker, right?
Second one? I don't know. I always just call them Dark Knight 1 and 2.
Okay, so in the second one with Heath Ledger, there was a scene. There's a scene in the movie where Bruce is kind of getting away from the Batman stuff and trying to be more of Bruce Wayne, and he's in like a in like a fancy restaurant. He has like the models on his arms. They get in the pool or the waiting pool or the fountain or whatever, and it's so weird because it's the only, and I've never really said this to anyone, so I don't know if anyone will ever agree, but I was like, because of Christian Bale being in Psycho or American Psycho, I was like, that's all I saw was Patrick Bateman in that moment. Like, it's just him being crazy and being weird to like throw people off from who he really is, because he was doing that constantly in that movie. And I was like, so I never felt like that was a Bruce Wayne thing.
I see what you mean.
Then I was like, but is that actually a Bruce Wayne thing where you have to kind of be crazy and over the top to steer people so far away from what you are? Then I was like, I don't know. But then it's like you go back to American Psycho and you're just like, well, he was doing that. And then obviously the whole thing of like, well, was that really him killing people, or was that just figments of his imagination?
I see what you mean. But I do think that is a very Bruce Wayne thing, because like it's funny. This is why I always loved Batman too, because he's not a superhero. He's an actual person, has tons of money and tons of training to be this person. But it's like Batman is is who he is, and Bruce Wayne is the fictional character. So, like I said, I just love Christian Bale. I think he's a great actor in everything that he's played. So I felt like he did a really great job, and really good lines in those movies in general. Like, what was that line? Talking about it with my husband, such a good line where he's like, he says blah blah blah, and then he's like, "But I don't have to kill you." Where he's holding him over the ledge, and he's like, basically like it's such a Batman thing where it's like, I'm gonna bring you down, but I don't have to be the one that actually kills you.
Right, because basically him being seen with him or whatever is going to basically seal his fate with like the bad guys.
Yeah. And I think that's super powerful. Like, because then we have like other characters like the Punisher, where it just walks in and kills everyone. But then it's like kind of like Batman's always like this knight, where he's like, you're gonna get your own fate. You're gonna get what's coming. I don't have to kill you myself. It's just gonna happen on its own, and I'm not gonna feel guilty about it.
I think you just stumbled across the perfect person that could probably do both. I think John Bernthal could actually be a good Batman and Bruce Wayne. I mean, look at the duality of what he did in the Punisher series, where he has to play.
Oh, I loved him there.
This person who is so driven by the atrocities that happened to him and his family, and being brainwashed basically as a former whatever branch of the military he was in, but then just being like, in spite of all that shit and like figuring out who has caused all this harm and wrong on me, I'm just going to become a vigilante unto myself with no real gadgets, no nothing. I'm just, because I want it, that I want to fucking kill you so bad. I'm willing to die or put myself into these horrible situations. And watching that show, you believe both sides. So when he's breaking down crying, thinking about his, the passing of his family, but then even when he's hardcore, just brutally murdering motherfuckers, that like, I feel like that is what's missing from a lot of the people who have played Bruce Wayne and Batman, is the vulnerability of being a human, but the extenuating circumstances where when push comes to shove, you're able to just go so far above and beyond what most people would put up with to get vengeance or justice or whatever.
Yeah.
That he's able to convey both of those things very believably, that I feel like he is probably one of the few that could pull it off.
Perhaps. But also I do feel, like I said, the writing is very, very important, because even if you get the perfect person, if the writing is off, like the story and everything, you're kind of like, wasted opportunity, And I think we need, as a closing with all these like superhero things, I think we need a little bit of a break at some point. It's just been like think about it. The first Batman movies were like 80s, 90s-ish. Yep, there was a good gap there before The Dark Knight came, and it came in a totally different way. Like that interpretation of like the original Tim Burton interpretation. And then we didn't really get too much of a break. Then we had, another reboot with the Justice League and all this, and like, here you go. Boom, boom, boom. Same thing with like, we have the Avengers and Spider-Man and this and that. Like, we need a little bit of a break, because so people can miss all these superheroes again before we bring them back, or we need to like create new stories, create a new like superhero or new villain or whatever, like bring back imagination, because I think there's too much like, oh, let's reboot this, let's reimagine this. It's like, can we just come up with like some new original stories too, perhaps?
Nope. Goes back to the whole thing with Judas Priest still headlining things after 40 years. It's people just want what they know.
Which I love Judas Priest. And yeah.
Well, it was a lot of fun talking to you. Where is there anything you would like to plug online or anything in general?
No, I mean, this was super cool, and just I guess my usual thing is like, go check out my socials, stuff I do, my Twitch, my Patreon, all that stuff, and stay up to date. If you liked the things I had to talk about, I talk about them a lot more on Twitch. And it's super cool. I just love talking to people about things that matter and things that don't matter and that are just fun to talk about.
I will definitely be following you on Twitch. My whole thing has been being active in other Twitch communities, and then when I hopefully start doing my thing, like people will be like, "Oh, I already know you, and you're pretty cool." Yeah. So follow you over there.
It'll be nice to see you there for sure.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully see you around when the band gets touring again.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
Absolutely. So that was my conversation with Vicky from the Agonist. Again, their latest EP, Days Before the World Wept, is out now. I want to thank her for taking the time to talk to me and kind of opening up about her lyrics and, kind of talking about some of the bigger picture things that we kind of discussed based on her lyrics. And that's why I'm a big fan of like tangible media, because, too often I feel like, especially with metal and kind of more of the subgenres of metal and so forth, that it just turns into this thing where I feel like a lot of times the lyrics are often overlooked. It's all about, the blast beats, and it's all about, the ripping solos, or, all these things. And I feel like at the end of the day, we forget that there's this other part of the music that is supposed to, paint, fill in the void and just kind of be this bigger narrative about it. It's one of those where, very recently I was making the comment about how I was watching Midnight Mass, and my wife was like, "Oh, I fucking hate subtitles," because I had the subtitles on. And I was like, she goes, "How can you watch it with it?" I go, "Because I'm watching it, but like at the same time, this show is it's so about the details, and it's so about the dialogue that's happening between characters, and there's so much character building as well as story building and things that are being said that set up other things." Like at one point, and no spoilers, but at one point in the show, toward the end, there's a part where if you understand Midnight Mass, church masses. So basically, they're singing in the congregation. They're singing this song at a certain point in the show, and the song toward the very end of the scene, the people are kind of walking through the congregation or walking through this small town, and they're singing this song. And at one point, I heard what I thought was a lyric during the hymn, and I was like, "Huh." And then I went back and turned the subtitles back on, because at this point I was watching this on the plane when I went to Buffalo a couple of days ago, and I'm watching this, and then I turned the subtitles back on for that because I didn't think I needed it, and it was one of those things, the lyrics of the hymn, and I don't know if it's a real hymn, I need to do a little bit more research on that myself, but it was basically setting up something that was about to happen and had been happening, and it was one of those that as I'm reading the lyrics to the hymn, I was like, holy shit, this is prophesizing so much of what's happening in the show, and they're just kind of too oblivious. All of that is to say that when you get the lyrics sometimes to your favorite bands, there's always the common theme of like, "Oh, I thought the lyric was this," and it's not. And it's like, if you have the lyrics and you actually took the time to read them, you would get the full understanding of what the lyrics are, and kind of where this vocalist is coming from, and kind of maybe the broader spectrum of what the band was trying to do as a whole through the piece of music. And I think sometimes we just do ourselves a disservice because we don't take that full deep dive. And so, as you heard, there's a lot going on this EP, and a lot going on with where Vicky's coming from. So I really do hope that you listen to this EP and go through and actually take the time to learn the lyrics and read along and kind of take in the full breadth of what the Agonist is doing, the picture they're trying to paint. You wouldn't look at a painting when it's half done and then judge it based on that. Some people would, I guess. I don't know. Art is subjective like that, I guess. All of that to say, though, I had a really great time talking to Vicky, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. I know I've been getting a lot of messages and emails lately talking about how everyone enjoys kind of the shift in the show, and how it's just a conversation now, and how they're getting more out of some of their favorite artists versus just, well, tell me about the record. What was it like recording it? All those kind of things. So without further ado, let's kind of start wrapping this episode up. I didn't want to bore you with more Batman information. That was really fun at the end. Talking about Batman, that is one of my favorite, probably comic book properties over my whole childhood, really. But truth be known, I've always been more of a Robin person, which, depending on which comic you follow, Robin ends up becoming Batman. So there's that. That was also one of my favorite books growing up, was the Nightfall book, where basically the events of what happened in the third Batman with Bane, that essentially set up Nightwing, as he was known at the time, to become become Batman. And then when Bruce got healed up, there was a fight over who got to be Batman anymore. Really cool. I love a lot of that shit. I don't think a lot of people know that I'm as into those things as I am. So sometimes when I get to slip into some kind of nerdish territory, I always take the time to do such. But if you would like to keep up with the Agonist, it's simple enough. Just go to theagonist.com. Facebook is at the Agonist Official. Instagram is at the Agonist Official, and Twitter is just the Agonist. If you would like to keep up with Vicky, you can find her on Instagram and Twitter at her name. I'm going to try to say it. I think it's Vicky Psarakis, Psarakis. She's also on Twitch, as is the band, quite a bit. So you can find them on Twitch. going through rehearsals right now, it looked like as of yesterday when I was kind of keeping up on some of the stuff they're doing. Also loved a little bit about Twitch. You obviously heard how I felt about that, and Vicky as well. But I think Twitch is a great thing, a great community. I would love to see more people being that inclusive in the real world of things in music, but we shall see. Anyway, if you would like to keep up with this podcast, simple enough, brewspeakpod.com is the landing page for everything. Also want to thank my wife, speaking of not landing anywhere, but we just actually we did just land. We landed back here in Michigan a couple of days ago from our trip in Buffalo, and I did a whole Patreon episode called What I Learned from a Podcast about my time in Buffalo. So if you would like to go subscribe to patreon.com/brewspeakpod.com, for as little as $1, you'll get to unlock a couple extra podcast episodes, including the What I Learned from a Podcast. And all the money supports myself and a lot of the costs associated with doing the podcast. But brewspeakpod.com is the landing page for everything. And what I was going to say is my wife got me back on these Mexican Cokes in the glass bottle. Never really had them, didn't really fuck with them too much, but I definitely got to say I'm a fan. And I think glass bottles are kind of the way to go for beverages. I know I enjoy a beer out of the glass bottle, so it would stand to make sense that glass bottles with pop in them or soda, whatever, would be equally as good. And yeah, you know what else is equally as good? Our show sponsors, Bean Bastard. It was actually really great getting to go to the brick and mortar and talking to Maruso for about an hour while I was there. That was great. Go to thebeanbastard.com, pick up some coffee. On Point Pomade, use our code BSP15, save 15% off your total purchase order. And last but not least, rockabilia.com. You can go over there and use our code Brewtally and take 10% off your total order. And last but not least, thank you for listening to this episode of the Brewtally Speaking Podcast. I am John. We'll see you next week where our episode's guest is Lena Scissorhands of Infected Rain. We'll talk to you then.
Sucked. Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about new?
Okay, I thought we were gonna get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks, but you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're gonna see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're gonna see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you, don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.